So, World of Warcraft. Kind of an odd game at this point. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 versions of the game currently operating, and with a sort of 6th one on the way. And I'm an old man. I've been playing on and off since 2004. I still even have my characters from back then, still alive and in the world. They can legally drink in the United States as of this year, I think. But I'll be honest, I don't think I ever did any real endgame content until Battle for Azeroth, when I first tried raiding with a dedicated team, including 2 of my friends. And back then, I was a dedicated tank player, which I continued in some sort of way into Classic WoW's release, where I played on and off from Classic, TBC, and then Wrath of the Lich King. But prior to that, I dabbled in pickup raids, some PvP, and just being an explorer, questy boy, and definitely an altaholic. Oh, and I'm also one of the 12 people who liked archaeology as a secondary profession from the moment it came out. But recently, I've been enjoying retail WoW again, but I had this growing feeling that I wasn't really doing much since I don't have the time to raid. So here I am playing The War Within, and a few of my friends mentioned to me that Mythics, or Mythic Pluses as a lot of people just call them, in Season 2 of The War Within is not only very challenging, but very rewarding. So I have this hunter, he's max level, decent enough gear from doing delves or whatever world content is out there, and I would try queuing every so often. But I just always felt a bit discouraged. I never even made it into a Mythic 0, let alone a Mythic Plus. Except for about 10 minutes, and it failed as soon as we started. But when I started trying to dedicate time to it, people were already on their way, and I only had 2-ish, maybe 3 hours if I was lucky to play, uninterrupted. And that's just, during the middle of the week. And I didn't really want to spend that time waiting for a queue of searching or making my own mythics when I didn't know anything about how to do them, where to go, and just how much the mechanics would change from heroics to mythics. Then the idea was born. What if I learned to heal? And what if I worked towards Keystone Master? If I make it there, awesome, I can do a video about the journey. If I don't make it there, I could create an even longer video about the experience, and then maybe make a lengthy post as the forums or somewhere like Reddit to see if anyone else is experiencing the same thing, and then we could become friends over a shared animosity towards a game that we've sunk in a couple thousand hours into. So, well, this video is about the former, and before we go into the breakdown of my journey, I figured we should kind of showcase the experience of me healing it all the way there. So, let's start with some B-roll.
You are inferior.
So, Chapter 1, getting to level cap and preparing for dungeons as a healer. So, here's a few things that transpired to get to level cap. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything about retail. It is very easy to level up in the current version of WoW, whether it's been a couple expansions ago or the War Within specifically. Getting there was easy. For this adventure, I used a level 70 boost that I had from God knows what expansion, and then I just dedicated myself to healing. I had tons of other characters I could select from doing the Mista Pandaria remix, but for some reason I felt a call to do a shaman healer, and that was the one class I didn't level up during that event. So there I am with a fresh 70, and I need to get to level 80, so I start doing normal dungeon queues and time walking events. And the reason I was only doing dungeons and the occasional world quest was that I wanted to practice as a healer. The practice, however, even without factoring in hindsight, was nothing like the healing I was going to be doing in Mythic Zeros, let alone any Mythic Pluses. But then gearing was another task. So now that we're level cap, I needed to start aiming for some sort of gear level, score, eye level, pick your comfort name for it. I was told around eye level 620 to 625 was about where I should aim for to do a pickup group and not utilize my friends that are playing retail currently. And my main focus here was just doing heroics, delves, and then eventually raid finder, which is really what got me to that final eye level mark and comfort to at least try. I was able to grab a 2-tier set bonus, and for some reason that was enough for me to feel like I could do this. And this is really where Tiny Wojapi was ready to go. So, Chapter 2, my first Mythics. I think starting into Mythics was the hardest part of this adventure. I was so scared to begin, which sounds a bit childish, especially as I read this script out loud, but it's the truth. I wanted to dive straight into something like a +2 Mythic, but the thought of ruining someone's key, especially with all the things that I've read from other places like WoW forums or just like the World of Warcraft subreddit, I just didn't want to ruin someone's time with me essentially learning how to heal Mythics. But as all great adventures truly begin, you need a little bit of destiny. This group doesn't know it, and probably wouldn't even remember me, but they were hosting a M0 chill run, or that's how they listed it in the group finder. There's no key, there's no time limit, and it's just doing a mythic together, and they needed a healer. So we entered the Rookery, and I experienced my first mythic in the most modern version of retail WoW that I've played in a long time. And a lot of the stresses of a keyed dungeon just weren't there. But I did, at least with my terrible gear, experience what it was meant to manage mana, use some cooldowns, and understand that not doing boss mechanics could kill me or the rest of the group. And this chill run was the confidence boost that I needed to step foot into my next one, which was a +2 Mechagon, a dungeon that I hadn't done in my journey here from just doing the normal dungeons or time walking, or a dungeon I even remember from the previous expansions that it was pulled from. And this dungeon was exhilarating. I messed up not dispelling the tank on the second boss, who was mildly annoyed at me, understandably so, but also told me to keep going and just pick up my mistakes. And we kept doing that dungeon and we didn't time that key. But it put me on the map. I had a mythic rating at 139, and from there, I felt like I could only go up. People need healers, but they might be picky about it, and that motivation was enough for me to keep going. And this is where we get to Chapter 3, the journey from ups and downs to feeling difficulty. So from doing this Mythic Plus journey, I really did feel my passion for World of Warcraft as a community of players start again. I was talking with my friends that play retail WoW a lot more, and we were just communicating, things about where I should be spending my quality time doing lower keys or learning mechanics, helping me with professions, and discussing the affixes that were changing that week. I mean, there's this whole affix about it pops up, and if you're a shaman and you change your talents, you can take the poison cleansing totem, and when you drop it, now I don't have to heal everyone to dispel it. I mean, all these things was just conversation, but it was also helping me become a better mythic player. And testing that shaman poison cleanse totem started making short work when I started getting to these higher keys that I was like, this is amazing. I would have never thought to do this. I would have never known to look these things up. So just kind of getting that feedback from the community, or even just existing on forums and a lot of these like Wowhead sites and sister sites on Mythic Pluses and pushing the limits, was nice. It was nice to feel part of the community. But it also wasn't just the friends that I already knew in the game. I started having fun chatting and interacting with pickup group people. And that could mean something as simple as just having a laugh at someone when they miss inserting the key during the countdown timer, or just me becoming that person to say no worries when someone would botch a mechanic that I totally botched at a lower key or earlier in that week. So there's clips running behind me as I speak, and you should be seeing all the different polls and walks of life that I was just proud to interact with. And yeah, some groups were harder than others. Sometimes it was because tanks had weird ways of pulling things, or maybe it's because you're peeling a Death Knight tank and their health pool jumps around like the stock market. Or maybe they just chose a route that you would never see on any of these Mythic Plus sites. And yes, I kind of does admit that I was trying to do some of the out-of-game research, but I learned that I'm a person who learns way more by doing the dungeons and just experiencing it one after another than reading things off of a website. Now, difficulty-wise, I would say Mythic Pluses for me got hard when I hit that +6 to +8 level. And I think it might have to do with where I was at in the season, because there's just a lot of people at that key level, but the rewards from things like the vault aren't really there for an overgeared player to step in and help, right? Getting that weekly bonus is very important to some people, and if you can do a higher key than an 8, you're not going to come down to a +6 for your vault reward. But this was my favorite part of doing these keys. It was like being the side characters of a shonen anime, trying to fight one of the big bad guys, and through our power of bug friendship, we made it through. But once I hit +10s and I had most of the rating to back it up while trying to submit my forms or requests to these groups, I was starting to hit that point where I had a dedicated group ready. I had a friend that was a tank, or a friend that was a DPS, or the rating alone would get me an instant invite. And especially if that night was a Monday night. As I was saying just 2 sentences ago, Vault Rewards is a big incentive for people to take lower geared or rated players, and being a healer, that was something I could use to my advantage. And that was very, very important, as you might be seeing in some of these clips, where you can see me struggling healing, but if it wasn't for, it being a Monday night or just being a healer, I probably wouldn't have made it into some of these higher key groups to advance my rating, and thus my gear. Then we get to Chapter 4. Making the Keystone Master, and then making the Keystone Hero. So I kept the pushing, and I studied a lot on Wowhead, on stat priority, and what gears or trinkets I should be looking for and focusing on. I will say the gear did slow down for me after I was steadily doing +4s and higher, but that gave me the time to actually look at the stat distribution and understand something like haste could be just as valuable or on par with versatility, because I wasn't rating. And in hindsight, the hardest part of this push was really, after I had all that gear and I started figuring everything out, was that I had to do dungeons now again for their rating and not just the number, right? You can do a +7 and time it, or you can do a +8 and not time it, and those ratings start to get very muddy as you look at the spread in front of you. So when you get this point of repeating something only 1 or 2 keys higher, or just doing it to get a better rating, I personally started to feel that pause again about, should I do this key? Do I have the time to do this key? And interestingly, I did start having those thoughts. It's just that this time the thoughts wasn't about bricking someone else's key, but them possibly wasting mine. And as I felt that hesitation again, I looked back to where I started and how I was scared that no one would take me into their dungeons. And yes, you can't do a chill run with a higher key, especially when you need rating, but I did realize that doing the dungeon, whether it benefited my score or not, would eventually pay its dividends. And that could be in my skill and just pressing these buttons at the right time, or just learning a route and the mechanics in a specific or particular dungeon. And then, I hit Keystone Master. And it might feel a bit anticlimactic, mostly because I'm bugging it, and you're just some guy in this group getting the achievement. But to me, I was elated. I felt amazing. I set out on this mini journey, and I wanted to learn how to heal, and I had to learn things like add-ons from nameplates or sell to do click healing, and I had to study this MMO more than I knew I was capable of. And that was rewarding. It was way different than studying to be a tank in classic WoW and managing threat and just understanding consumables and all these other things. There are a lot of similar mechanics and similar knowledge bases, but retail WoW was kind of overwhelming to do so. And so being able to do that, even though this was more dungeons than raids, I felt good about myself. And not to mention, it was fun as hell doing it. I mean, it was fun enough that I continued to do more and more and as many plus 10s as I could, which actually led me to getting the next achievement, which was KeyStone Hero. And I will say, keys at the plus 10 level, at least to me, added a crazy sense of difficulty. The actions per minute required, way different. And then just the adrenaline that was constant. It really didn't matter how good the group was, or if we had the right combinations of classes, or does this person have a battle res, do they not have a battle res, like all these types of things. Just every major pull gave me that breath holding focus mode that I loved. That sort of draining feeling that you're keeping your eyes open for so long that they start to tear because you realize you haven't blinked. And you have 28 minutes or 37 minutes to do the entire dungeon, and you just feel it going. You almost lose track of that time. And honestly, like, I don't really have too much time to binge something like an MMO at this difficulty level or this intensity level. I could dedicate 2-ish hours a night maybe during the week or on a Sunday night, and those interruptible times was when I would aim to do a key. And that part was probably the hardest. Comparing this adventure, just doing Mythics, to something like Raid Finder or even classic WoW Dungeons or even PvP, it's just the time to make sure you can focus and get that Mythic plus dungeon complete was different than any of the other listed game modes or styles. But that dedication, at least for me, scratched that raid dedication itch that I personally don't feel like I have the time for. And that, to me, just leads me to this last chapter, which is chapter 5, A Journey's Conclusion. So there's Tiny Wajapi, and he has become a Keystone Master. And then he became a Keystone Hero, and it was a fun journey for me and hopefully digital him. I know part of its difficulty came from me learning a class role that I've never done before, at least not in any form of retail WoW in its current state. But being a healer role did give me a much faster opportunity to progress as mostly a solo player. I wasn't held to my own keys to advance rating, nor was I stuck in queue times looking for a group in the group finder area. But this video essay was more to document my experience in this little journey. I haven't done anything that notable in retail WoW, and I'll admit it's mostly been out of fear. A fear of not knowing enough, thinking I wouldn't be able to learn how to do something, keep up with these players, or even just find the time to practice and do so. But this journey showed me that I let that fear prevent me from doing something that I wanted to do in this game, as silly as that may sound. And setting a goal, even something like a World of Warcraft goal, can rekindle or set a spark in myself, or maybe for you, the viewer. And maybe that could be Mythic Dungeons, or joining a raid team, or going for a specific PvP rating. And if you'd like any advice, or just some words of encouragement, I say go for it. Set a goal, and it can be small, or it can be large. But whatever you aim for and land as you soar towards it, I think you're going to be happy you did it. So for World of Warcraft, The War Within Season 2, and the future seasons, in a game full of cosmetics, mounts, transmogs, storylines, expansions, and competitiveness, you and myself can still choose what makes this old as hell game still fun. So if you've done this grind, or you're doing something else in WoW that sounds like a lot of fun, I'd love to hear about it. But thank you so much for taking the time to hear about my experience and my little journey here. I'm matthew.E. Thank you so much.